Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez, and you're listening to episode 22 of our special series, The Dark Record, where we uncover history's eeriest stories, one strange and unsettling case at a time. Some stories are whispered in folklore, passed down through generations as campfire tales or local legend. Others are written into court records and etched in stone, blending the line between history and the supernatural. Tonight's case is one of those rare moments where both collide. The next entry into the dark record, the Greenbrier Ghost. Let's begin. It was January 23rd, 1897, and winter had wrapped its grip around Greenbrier County, West Virginia. The hills were silent, the roads hard with ice, and the chill in the air carried a certain weight, the kind that seeps through wood and stone and lingers in the bones. In a small farmhouse near the hamlet of Livesay's Mill, a young bride named Zona Heaster Shue was found lifeless at the foot of the stairs. Zona, as she was known to her family and friends, had only recently married Edward Trout Shue, a blacksmith who'd come to the area looking for work. The marriage was still fresh, just a couple of months old, and the couple's life together was meant to be beginning. Instead, it ended suddenly and without warning. A neighbor boy, sent to the house on an errand by Trout, stumbled onto the grim scene. Zona lying still, her body oddly positioned at the base of the staircase. The local doctor, George W. Knapp, was summoned. He gave only the briefest of examinations, citing heart failure, sometimes referred to in reports as everlasting faint. With that, the case was closed. No inquest, no lingering questions, just a death certificate for a young woman not yet out of her 20s. In the rolling hills of Appalachia, sudden deaths were not uncommon. Illness, accidents, and the isolation of mountain living could all explain a life cut short. At least that was the official explanation. But for those who knew Zona best, especially her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, the scene didn't feel right. And in the weeks that followed, it would become clear that this story was far from over. Zona's sudden death was accepted at face value by the doctor and, for a time, by most of the small Greenbrier community. But one person was never convinced. Her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, had carried doubts from the moment she learned her daughter had married Trout Shue. She hadn't trusted him. Mary Jane believed her daughter could have done better, and that instinct only deepened into suspicion once Zona's body was returned home. Tradition in the region called for women in the family and community to prepare the dead for burial. It was their hands that would wash the body, dress it, and arrange it for the wake. Yet Trout Shue insisted on doing this work himself. He chose a high-necked gown, buttoned all the way up, and tied a stiff scarf around Zona's throat. He lingered near the casket throughout the wake, often shifting the pillows and fussing with the scarf if anyone drew too close. Neighbors noticed, but no one dared to speak out. For Mary Jane, it was one more confirmation that something was wrong. To her, the manner of her daughter's death felt unfinished, unresolved. The way Trout controlled the funeral, the scarf, the positioning, the constant interruptions, only fueled her unease. Her grief refused to settle, and her suspicion hardened into something more. Mary Jane Heaster would not let this matter rest. Mary Jane's grief was heavy, but it soon gave way to something stranger. She began to pray, asking for clarity, for truth, for her daughter to somehow reveal what had really happened inside that little farmhouse. Weeks after the funeral, her prayers were answered, or so she believed. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly. One night, she awoke to the faint sound of movement in her room, the air around her colder than the rest of the house. At first, she thought it was a dream, or perhaps the weight of her sorrow playing tricks on her. But then, in the corner, a soft light appeared. The light grew stronger, shifting, forming the outline of a figure. Before long, it became clear. It was Zona. For 4 nights in a row, Mary claimed her daughter came to her. The first night, she was a pale glow, silent but unmistakable. By the second night, the apparition grew clearer, speaking in a voice Mary recognized instantly as her daughter's. By the third, the story unfolded in detail. Zona said that Trout had been cruel, controlling, and violent. On the day of her death, she had not collapsed from weakness or illness. She had been strangled in a fit of rage. The ghost even demonstrated how it happened, slowly turning its head until the neck appeared twisted unnaturally, backwards, broken. Mary Jane's account didn't end there. She described how her daughter confided in her about the unhappy marriage, about Trout's temper, and about how he had taken her life. On the 4th and final night, the apparition left Mary with one last chilling detail, that her neck had been broken between the first and second vertebrae. It was a claim so specific that Mary could not ignore it. Some versions of the story include one more unsettling sign. Mary washed the scarf that had been tied around Zona's neck. At first, the water ran clear, but then it turned red, the color of blood, and no amount of rinsing could make it clean again. To Mary Jane, this was no ordinary grief or superstition. It was evidence. Convinced she had been given the truth directly from beyond the grave, Mary Jane Heaster set out to make sure the world heard it too. Mary Jane Heaster did not let the visions fade into the silence of her home. To her, they were more than dreams. They were testimony, and if no one else was going to act, she would. She began speaking openly of the ghostly visits, telling neighbors and community members what Zona had revealed. Some thought her grief had tipped her into obsession. Others weren't so quick to dismiss it. They too had noticed Trout's strange behavior at the funeral, the odd insistence on dressing Zona's body himself, the scarf around her neck. Gossip and suspicion had already been swirling through Greenbrier County. Mary Jane's story only gave it a sharper edge. Her determination brought her to the office of the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston. Preston was not the kind of man easily swayed by ghost stories. He was a lawyer, not a believer in folk tales. But Mary Jane's persistence, combined with the odd circumstances surrounding Zona's death, made an impression. She told him everything: the visits, the words her daughter had spoken, the demonstration of the broken neck. Whether Preston believed her or not, he couldn't ignore the details. At the same time, Dr. Knapp, the physician who had originally ruled Zona's death a simple heart failure, admitted something troubling. He confessed that when Trout brought him to the scene, the grieving husband had made it nearly impossible to do a proper exam. Trout had cradled the body, sobbing and refusing to let go, shutting down any attempt at careful investigation. Knapp had given up, signing the paperwork without inspecting the body fully. It was a mistake that now weighed heavily on him. This admission, combined with Mary Jane's unshakable conviction, gave Preston the grounds he needed. He ordered Zona's body to be exhumed and a new autopsy performed. The date was set for February 22, 1897, less than a month after Zona's burial. In the cold stillness of a one-room schoolhouse, chosen for its space and isolation, a small group of physicians gathered. They worked for hours as Mary Jane waited outside. What they found was far from the peaceful, everlasting faint Trout had claimed. Zona's neck was broken between the first and second vertebrae. Her windpipe was crushed, the ligaments torn. There were deep bruises along her neck, the clear marks of strangulation. Mary Jane's visions had been confirmed, not just by faith, but by science. The discovery of Zona's broken neck turned quiet suspicion into open accusation. Edward Trout Shue was arrested and charged with murder. The trial was set for late June of 1897 in Greenbrier County, and the courthouse soon became the stage for one of the strangest cases in American legal history. The prosecution laid out a clear story. Shue had a violent temper, a troubled past, and a wife who was young and vulnerable. The evidence from the exhumation was undeniable. Zona's death was no accident, nor was it the result of sudden illness. Her neck had been broken, her windpipe crushed, and the finger marks on her throat told the story more plainly than any witness could. The jury heard of Shue's prior marriages, one ending in divorce after his first wife accused him of cruelty, the other ending in his second wife's unexplained death. It painted the picture of a man with a pattern, not a misfortune. But the trial also became famous for something more unusual. When Mary Jane Heaster took the stand, she did not shy away from telling the jury about her daughter's ghostly visits. She spoke with conviction, describing how Zona had come to her night after night, revealing the truth and even showing how her neck had been broken. The defense tried to discredit her, pressing her on details, hoping to make her appear irrational or unstable. Instead, her calmness and certainty only reinforced her credibility. The judge instructed the jury to weigh the case only on the physical evidence, the autopsy, the testimony of witnesses, and the known character of the accused. But it was impossible to separate the ghost story from the trial. Newspapers picked it up, and the public followed closely, fascinated by the idea of a ghost stepping into the courtroom. On July 11, 1897, the jury reached its verdict. Edward Shue was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. He would never again see freedom. The verdict did not bring calm to the town. In fact, tension ran high. Rumors spread that a lynch mob was forming, that Shue would be dragged from his cell and hanged. A group of nearly 30 men reportedly gathered for just that purpose, but the sheriff and his deputies managed to disperse the crowd before violence broke out. For a county already steeped in whispers of the supernatural, it was a narrow escape from mob justice. Shue was transferred to the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, where he lived out the rest of his days. When the trial ended and Trout Shue was sent away to Moundsville Penitentiary, the story should have faded into the quiet hills of West Virginia. But it didn't. Zona's death and the remarkable way the truth had surfaced left an imprint that would linger for more than a century. Mary Jane Heaster remained in Greenbrier County for the rest of her life. She never backed down from her claim that her daughter's ghost had spoken to her. To neighbors, she repeated the story with the same steady conviction she had shown in court. Whether people believed her or not, there was no mistaking her certainty. She passed away in September of 1916, nearly 20 years after Zona's death, and she carried that story with her until the end. As for Trout Shue, his life came to an unremarkable conclusion behind prison walls. He died in 1900 during a local epidemic that swept through the penitentiary. With no mourners and no marker, he was buried in an unmarked grave. His name lingers now only in connection with the crime, his memory tethered to one of America's strangest trials. But Zona herself did not fade from memory. In fact, she became something more than just a victim. She became legend. Her story was retold in newspapers, in oral histories, and eventually in books and plays. Local lore held her up as proof that justice could come even from beyond the grave. And in 1991, nearly a century after her death, the state of West Virginia erected a historical marker near Sam Black Church along U.S. Route 60. It reads in part, "Interred in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shue. Her death in 1897 was at first presumed to be natural, until her mother claimed that her daughter's spirit appeared to her, describing how she was killed by her husband Edward. An autopsy on the exhumed body verified the ghost's account. Edward was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Only known case in which testimony from ghost helped convict a murderer. That marker stands today not just as a roadside curiosity, but as a rare acknowledgement that folklore and the law once intersected in the mountains of Appalachia. Travelers stop to take pictures, locals tell the tale to visitors, and the Greenbrier Ghost has become one of West Virginia's most enduring legends. Plays, an opera, and even a musical have drawn on the story, weaving together fact and myth into performance. In every retelling, the same theme endures: a mother's love strong enough to hear a daughter's voice beyond the grave, and a story so strange it could only have been carried by time itself. For believers, the Greenbrier Ghost stands as undeniable proof that the dead can speak, that truth can force its way into the living world when justice demands it. But for historians and skeptics, the story raises harder questions. Was it truly a ghost that led to Trout Shue's conviction? Or was it the determination of a grieving mother who refused to be silenced? The records suggest a more complicated picture. Mary Jane Heaster's testimony about her daughter's ghost certainly captured attention, but the conviction itself rested on the physical evidence. The exhumation revealed clear signs of violence: finger marks on the throat, a crushed windpipe, a broken neck. These findings would have been enough to convince any jury, with or without the story of the ghost. In that sense, the haunting may have been more a tool of persuasion than a supernatural intervention. Some historians have argued that Mary Jane used the ghost story as a way to force action. In an era when women's voices often carried little weight in matters of law or medicine, her claims of spectral testimony couldn't be brushed aside so easily. Whether or not she truly believed in the visions, the effect was the same. The prosecutor reopened the case, the body was exhumed, and justice was finally pursued. Others point to the passage of time and the way folklore tends to blur details. Over the years, tellings of the case have grown more dramatic. Some accounts describe the ghost turning its head completely around. Others speak of blood-stained water that never ran clean. These details make the story richer, more chilling, but they may also be embellishments added in the decades after the trial. The Greenbrier Historical Society itself has noted how retellings vary, and how memory and myth have intertwined to make the case what it is today. Yet even with all the skepticism, one fact remains unshakable. The testimony of Mary Jane Heaster, ghost story and all, entered the courtroom and became part of the official record. It may not have been the decisive piece of evidence, but it has become the defining piece of the legend. That alone makes this case unique in American legal history, where folklore, faith, and fact collided under the roof of a rural courthouse in 1897.
Hello, I'm here during the lunch rush with Janice, who owns her own food truck.
Best cheesesteaks in town.
Janice traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for her food truck business. We're here where she needs us most.
They sure are.
We make it so easy for her to save, with customised coverage that grows with her business. Sorry, I just get so emotional talking about saving folks' money.
Not this onion I'm chopping?
It's just so beautiful. Oh yeah, no, it's the onion.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. Get more with Geico.
The case of the Greenbrier Ghost lives at the crossroads of law and legend. On one hand, it is the story of a young woman whose life was cut short by violence, her death nearly overlooked as a tragic accident. On the other, it is the tale of a grieving mother who refused to let her daughter's voice be silenced, even if it meant claiming that voice came from beyond the grave. Whether you believe Zona's ghost truly appeared or that Mary Jane used the story as a desperate tool, the result was the same. Justice was served. Trout Shue spent the rest of his life behind prison walls, and Zona's death was recognized for what it was: murder, not misfortune. That outcome was shaped not only by forensic fact, but also by the force of conviction carried by a mother's testimony. For me, this story says something deeper about the human experience. It shows how grief can push people beyond the limits of what's ordinary, and how faith, whether in God, in the unseen, or simply in the bond between a mother and her child, can move mountains, even in the cold halls of a courthouse. It's a reminder that folklore isn't just entertainment. Sometimes it is the vessel that carries truth when truth might otherwise be ignored. Today, if you travel through West Virginia, you can still find Zona's grave in the quiet cemetery at Soul Chapel Methodist. Nearby, a highway marker stands as proof that this story is more than local legend. It is history. The marker makes it plain. This is the only known case where the testimony of a ghost helped convict a murderer. It's a bold claim, and maybe it's not entirely accurate in a legal sense, but it captures the power of the tale. And so, the story of Elva Zona Heaster Shue is remembered, not just as tragedy, but as a strange and enduring example of how the past refuses to rest. A whisper from the beyond, a mother's relentless love, and a verdict that still echoes through time. That brings us to the end of episode 22 of The Dark Record. We've retraced the haunting story of Elva Zona Heaster, the young woman remembered as the Greenbrier Ghost. Whether born of grief, faith, or something beyond our understanding, her mother's testimony changed history and left behind a legend that endures. Remembered, retold, and now added to the record. Next time, we travel across the Atlantic to Pontefract, England, where a quiet council house became the stage for one of the most violent poltergeist hauntings ever recorded. We'll uncover the Black Monk of Pontefract. Until then, I'm Lyle Perez, and this has been the Halloween Podcast presenting The Dark Record. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps keep the show alive and weird. You can also explore sources, extras, and more at our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Halloween Podcast or at our website, thehalloweenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes on the shadows. And remember, sometimes the dead do speak and justice listens. Have a good night.